So hello to all my community scientists, new and returning. My name is Erin Smith. I am a doctoral student in Dr. Andrea Kirkwood's lab at Ontario Tech University in Oshawa, formerly known as UOIT or University of Ontario Institute Technology. So I started working in Dr. Kirkwood's lab about 3 years ago now. I started working on a community science project in Lake Scugog. And then from there, I started my master's again with that project, and last year expanded when I started my PhD, and I expanded into Balsam, Cameron, Sturgeon, and Pigeon Lake. So I've been slowly growing my reach out into more of the Kawartha Lakes, and I'm excited and looking forward to this summer where we'll have an even wider reach with this study. As you are aware, this year is quite different than other years with the COVID-19 pandemic hitting. So most water quality monitoring programs are either being delayed, modified, or canceled altogether. This is a matter of keeping people safe, of course, but we also found that creates a gap, and that's a gap that we want to fill with our research project, which we can do using social distancing methods. So the goal of this project is to get an idea of what water quality looks like across the Kawartha Lakes during the 2020 year, and then also to be able to compare this to previous data to see if there is a change in water quality during a pandemic. So we do have previous data on the lakes we've studied. So as I mentioned, Balsam, Cameron, Sturgeon, Pigeon, and Scugog. And we also know there are other programs like the Lake Partnership Program that has data on things like phosphorus, which we can compare to as well, to get an idea of how water quality is being altered during a global pandemic. So now I'm just going to go over what you will find in your sampling kit before we start actually showing you how to sample. So the first thing you will have are 8 of these sampling cups. So as we mentioned, they are 250 milliliter cups, and we're going to fill them not quite to that, but I'll show you that again when I show you how to sample. So each cup will be labeled, and you will see you have a site code. This will be related to what your lake is. It'll be a 3-letter code. And then you will have a number that will be your specific site number. That'll be the same for all containers. And then either A or B, and then that will be for each rep. So you'll have an A and a B for each sampling date. So as you can see, we've got June, you'll have June, July, August, and September. And so that'll be your sampling cups. Next you will have a set of gloves. So these are, they're not latex, they're just kind of plastic. And they're just to protect the samples. And then we have a few sheets of paper. So you have your observation sheet. So this I will go through, but basically you fill out one column each time you sample. And then finally we have another set of instructions. So although you will have access to this video for the entirety of the summer, for a kind of quick refresher before you sample each day, we have some instructions on how to take your samples. And that is everything you will find in your sampling kit. Alright, so to do your actual sampling, first you will need your 2 sampling containers. So again, look at the labels to make sure you have the right date and replicates. And then once you have these, you also need your gloves, which we'll be putting on again to protect our sample. So you're going to go to your sampling spot. If you did this study with us in previous years, go to the same spot you did your samples from before. If you're new to the study, try to find a spot on your dock where the depth of the water is 1 meter. Okay, so we know it doesn't have to be exact, but if you know approximately in the area where it's 1 meter, go to that spot to take your samples, and then for every sample after that, go to that same spot no matter if the water level changes. We just want to be consistent with your location. Okay, so now we're going to take the sample. So I'm not on a dock, but you can get the idea here. So first thing is going to be putting your gloves on. So just trying to be careful, you don't want to touch the outside of them too much. And alright, so once you've got your gloves on, take your first container and you're going to go to the water, and you want to get it so it's about 10 centimeters depth. So that's about the length of one hand. submerged vertically, okay? So that's what you can use to measure it. And then you are simply going to put it in one hand, use the other to measure the depth, so you've got it about 10 centimeters. And then once you have it at your location, take the lid off. And then, there we go, allow the container to fill, put the lid back on, seal it up, and then remove it from the water. Now, we have a sample and it is completely full, but this is going to be a problem because we're freezing it. So what you need to do is you need to remove a little bit of water. So now that it's out, I'm going to take the lid off a little bit and just pour out a small amount of water. So, just like that. And then now you can see it's not quite to the top, so it has room to expand when your sample freezes. And then that's all there is to it. So you've collected one sample, you're going to do the exact same thing with your second container. So now that you have collected your water samples, we would also appreciate it if you could fill in the data collection sheet that goes with it. So these have been distributed within your kit, and we just want you to fill out the information as detailed and accurately as possible. So that starts with recording the date and time of sample collection. So we understand that although we would like you to sample on the preferred sample date that we have sent out, we understand that not everyone's going to be at their waterfront property at that date and time. So if you aren't, please do try to take your sample in the morning, again between 8 and 9 if possible, and then as close to that date as possible. Even if it is before or after the date, if it's within a week, we're still happy to take that sample. So that means that if it's you're only up on the weekends and the sample is on Monday, please take that sample on the Sunday and then record this on the sheet. So we need to know when the sample was taken. We don't care if it's a different day, but we do care that we know when it was taken. This is because we want to be able to investigate trends like air and water temperature and precipitation events before sampling. This can have a pretty big impact on nutrients, so we do want to make sure that we are aware of when samples are being taken. So after you've recorded your date and time, if you can record air and water temperature, we understand that not everyone has the means to do this, so if you don't have a thermometer that you can use in the water, that's okay. If you can even just do air temperature, we would appreciate that because we can potentially use that to infer water temperature as well. Next is the current weather conditions. So this is the weather conditions while you're taking your sample. So is it rainy? Is it sunny? Overcast? Humid? What's the weather like, basically? We also want to know if there's been anything significant in the past 48 hours or so. So if there's been a major rain event a day or two before, we want to hear about that. Lots of wind, things like that are all important for us to hear about as well. And then finally, we have an observation section. So this is a little bit more for, we know that you know your waterfront, so we want to hear from you about what are you seeing? Are there differences? Is there more algae growth, more plant growth, or less? Are the water levels higher or lower? These are things that we know you as community scientists living on the lakes are aware of, and we really want to hear from you about those observations. So if you can fill those in to your best ability, we appreciate that as well. And then finally, once you've filled out the physical copy, we have created a Google form for you to fill out. Has all these same sections. So if you can type in your responses on the sheet into the form, that will make it a lot easier for us to record your data. And it's also a way that we can collect photos. So if you take pictures of your waterfront property while you're sampling, you can upload those with the observation sheet so that we can use those and take them into account as well for our study. So that is the data collection sheet. So once sample collection has been completed in September, we will be able to take back your samples, again using those depots we use to distribute your sample kits. And once we get them back in the lab, we will be able to start our analysis. So as we've informed you with our kind of introduction to this study, we will be primarily looking at nutrients, that being phosphorus and nitrogen. So specifically we will be measuring total phosphorus, and then we will be doing a nitrogen sweet analysis. So this includes nitrite, nitrate, ammonium, ammonia, total caldol, nitrogen, and then we can use that to get total nitrogen. So this can tell us a lot about what's going into the lake, and these are really important, these nutrients, for productivity in your lake. So things like plant and algae growth are dependent on these nutrients, and if we see them in excess, we can get really high growth and even sometimes harmful algae blooms. So once we have these results, we will be able to compare them to previous year's data. So that includes our own data on the lakes we have studied previously, and we can also use some of the data that's available from the government, from things like the Lake Partner Program, so we can get an idea of how these nutrients are shifting on all of the lakes during a pandemic year. And of course, once we have these findings, we will be able to give them back to you. So we plan to give you each an individualized report telling you about your site and your lake, so you can have an idea of what the water samples you collected, what they actually look like. Alright, so now I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch this training video. I hope you enjoyed it a little bit and found it useful. And I want to thank you for becoming a community scientist. Without you, this project would not be possible. So then next steps, I will be doing some virtual Q&A sessions. So if you have questions as follow-up to this video or just in general about our project, I'd be happy to see you there, and I will send the details about that in an email. And then if you have any other questions, you can reach me via email at erin.smith@uoit.ca. So thanks again, and happy sampling!